Disclaimer: this story is a personal experience shared to reflect on the complexities of family, trust, and love. It is meant to offer insight and hope, not to encourage judgment or hurt anyone. My father's confession broke me, then taught me what love isn't, a true infidelity story. I still remember that day like it was yesterday, the day my world shattered in a way I never expected. It started with a quiet phone call, one that should have been simple but turned into a moment I wished I could erase forever. My father's voice trembled as he spoke, and in those few words, everything I believed about my family and about love began to unravel. He confessed something that no child ever wants to hear from their parent, a secret that broke more than just trust. It broke me. I grew up thinking my father was a man who stood for honesty and loyalty. He was the kind of dad who told me love meant forever, who held my mother's hand like they were the only two people in the world. But the truth? That day, I found out how far from the truth my childhood had been. His confession was about something that didn't just affect him, it rippled through our whole family and shook the foundation of everything I thought I knew about love. As I sat there, stunned and confused, I kept asking myself, how could this happen? How could the man I looked up to and trusted so much be the same man who made choices that hurt us all? The pain wasn't just in the words he said, it was in the silence that followed, in the way my mother didn't say anything but her eyes told stories of heartbreak I was too young to fully understand. That moment taught me that love isn't always the fairy tale we want it to be. Sometimes, love can be messy, painful, and filled with secrets we never expect. This story isn't just about my father's mistake. It's about how that mistake changed the way I saw love, family, and forgiveness. It's about the moments when your heart breaks but you still have to find a way to keep living, and to understand that what we think love is might not always be what it should be. It's about the hard lessons we learn when trust is broken and how those lessons shape us into who we are. The confession didn't just shatter my world, it opened my eyes. I started noticing the little things, hidden glances, quiet arguments, the way smiles sometimes didn't reach the eyes. It made me realize that love isn't always kind or fair. Sometimes it's complicated, and sometimes it hurts more than it heals. But even in the darkest moments, there's something to learn, something that changes you forever. As the days passed, I kept replaying that phone call in my head, trying to make sense of it all. How do you forgive someone who broke the very foundation of your family? How do you hold on to love when it feels like it's slipping away? And most importantly, what does love really mean when trust has been broken? I don't have all the answers yet. This story is only the beginning. There's so much more to share, the moments of anger, the nights of tears, and the unexpected ways love showed up even when I thought it was gone. My father's confession broke me, yes. But it also taught me something crucial about what love isn't, and that's the story I want to tell. So, if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, or if you're struggling to understand what love truly means, this story might feel familiar. Because sometimes, the hardest lessons come from the people closest to us. And sometimes, those lessons are the ones that teach us who we really are. But what happened after that confession? How did my family move forward, or did we? What did my father say next? Those answers, well, you'll have to stick around to find out. Let me know if you want me to continue with the next part. After that confession, everything started to feel different, even though on the surface, nothing had really changed yet. It was like the air in our home had thickened, heavy with things unsaid and feelings that no one wanted to face. Before that day, my father had been this strong, almost untouchable figure in my life. But suddenly, he felt fragile, like a mask had slipped, and I was seeing a side of him I never knew existed. The man I thought I knew was flawed, deeply human in ways I wasn't ready for. Growing up, our family was always the kind people admired. My parents seemed happy, they laughed at the right times, and to me, they were the perfect team. I believed love was simple because that's what I had been shown. But behind the smiles, there were cracks I never noticed. I guess when you're a kid, you don't see the little things, the whispered arguments, the tension when my mother thought no one was listening. You only see what you want to see. After the confession, I started piecing things together. late-night phone calls my father would rush away to take. The way my mother sometimes looked at him, her eyes filled with something between sadness and anger. And now, the heavy silence that had replaced the laughter. I realized love wasn't just about holding hands or sharing dinners. It was about trust. And that trust had been broken in a way that felt like a knife to my heart. My father never gave me all the details, and maybe that was for the best. But the hints were enough. It was about someone else, someone outside our family. An affair. A word that felt too big and painful to say aloud. Hearing it from him, that man who had always told me about loyalty and respect, was like watching the ground fall away beneath me. How could he do this to the woman who loved him? To us? I remember sitting in my room that night, staring at the ceiling, trying to fight the flood of emotions, hurt, anger, confusion, and a strange sense of betrayal that went beyond what I expected. I wanted answers, but I was also scared of what those answers might mean. Would my family survive this? Would I ever be able to look at my father the same way again? The questions kept spinning, and no matter how hard I tried, there was no easy answer. Days turned into weeks, and the atmosphere at home stayed tense. My mother didn't confront my father openly, at least not in front of us kids. But I could see it in her quiet moments, in the way she sometimes held back tears. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know how. It felt like walking on a tightrope, afraid that any wrong move would cause everything to fall apart. And maybe that's what love is sometimes, holding on when everything inside you wants to let go. I also noticed my father changing. He was distant, more silent than usual. Sometimes he'd catch my eye and quickly look away, like he was carrying a heavy weight he didn't want to share. I wondered if he felt guilty or if he was trying to protect us from the pain. But no matter what he felt, the damage was done. That confession wasn't just a secret anymore, it was a reality we had to live with. At school, I kept pretending everything was normal. I didn't want my friends to see the cracks in my family. But inside, I was breaking. The idea that the person you trust most could betray that trust, it's something no child should ever have to face. It made me question everything about relationships, about love, about what I wanted for my own future. I started noticing the little ways people around me dealt with pain. Some buried it deep inside, like my mother. Others tried to act like nothing happened. I wasn't sure which was worse. But I realized one thing clearly: infidelity wasn't just about a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was about the consequences that ripple through lives, sometimes forever. The hardest part was not knowing what would come next. Would my parents separate? Would things ever go back to the way they were? Could trust ever be rebuilt after such a deep wound? These questions haunted me, but every time I tried to bring them up, the conversation would shut down. It was like we were all waiting for something, but no one knew what. And then there was the silence that spoke louder than any argument or explanation. It was in that silence I realized how much love isn't what I thought it was. Love isn't perfect or easy. Sometimes, it's about pain, mistakes, and the difficult choices we have to make. But it's also about fighting through the broken pieces to find some kind of truth. So here I am, still trying to understand what that confession meant, not just for my father, but for all of us. It broke me, yes, but it also made me see the real, messy side of love. The side no one talks about. And as much as I wish I could say it got better quickly, the story is far from over. Because after the confession, nothing stayed the same. And what came next? Well, that's the part I'm still living through, and the part I want to share with you. The moments when everything you believed in feels like it's falling apart, but you have to decide, do you hold on or let go? Stay with me, because this story is just beginning. After weeks of holding everything inside, the weight of that confession began to change the way I saw everyone around me, not just my parents, but myself too. My father's betrayal wasn't just a secret hidden in our home anymore, it had started to spill into every part of my life. At school, at family gatherings, even in the quiet moments when I was alone, the question kept haunting me, what does love really mean when it's broken like this? My mother, who had always been so strong and steady, became a mystery. She didn't yell or cry openly, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch her staring out the window, lost in thought. She started spending more time away, saying she was just going for a walk or running errands. I wondered if she was trying to escape the pain, or maybe she was searching for answers of her own. It felt like we were all living in the same house but trapped behind walls built from disappointment and silence. At the same time, my father seemed even more distant. The man who used to share stories and jokes with me was now quiet and sometimes avoided my questions. I wanted to understand why he did what he did, but when I tried to talk, his answers were vague or just silence. It hurt more than I expected because I realized that sometimes, the people we love don't have the answers either. They are just as lost and broken as we are. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between my parents, something I wasn't supposed to hear. My mother was trying to understand why my father did what he did, asking if it meant their marriage was over. His response was confusing. He said he was sorry but didn't know if he could fix things. That moment made everything even more unclear. It was like our family was hanging on a thread, and no one knew if it would snap or hold. Around this time, I started noticing the changes in myself. I was angry and confused. I felt like I couldn't trust people the way I used to. The idea of love had become a puzzle I didn't know how to solve. I wondered if I would ever be able to believe in love again without fear. The betrayal of my father wasn't just about him, it was about how it made me question everything I had been taught about relationships and loyalty. Outside of home, things got complicated too. Friends would ask if everything was okay, and I'd just smile and say yes, but inside, I was falling apart. Some friends didn't understand why I was so quiet, and others tried to push me to talk. I didn't want to burden anyone with my family's pain. It was easier to keep it hidden than to explain something so personal and painful. But that silence made me feel more alone. Then, there was the person my father had been involved with, the other woman. I didn't know who she was or what she wanted, but her presence felt like a shadow over our family. I heard whispers and saw my father's phone light up with messages he tried to hide. The thought that he shared parts of himself with someone else made the hurt even deeper. It wasn't just about the secret, it was about the trust that was broken in a way that couldn't be ignored. Even now, I'm not sure what the future holds for my family. The confusion, the anger, and the sadness are all still there, tangled in ways I can't untangle. What I do know is that this story isn't just about betrayal or mistakes, it's about trying to understand love in its most difficult forms. It's about holding on when everything seems to be falling apart and trying to find a way forward, even if the path is unclear. So I keep asking myself, can love survive this? And what does it look like when love isn't enough? The answers are still waiting somewhere in the silence, in the broken moments, and in the quiet hope that maybe, somehow, healing is possible. But for now, the tension remains. The story isn't over. And the hardest part might still be ahead. The days that followed felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. Every time I thought I could breathe, the weight of what had happened pressed down on me again, suffocating and relentless. The silence in our house was no longer peaceful, it was a reminder of everything broken and uncertain. I found myself watching my parents carefully, searching for signs of hope or maybe the final collapse. But all I saw were strangers living under the same roof. My father became more withdrawn, almost like a ghost moving through the rooms. He avoided eye contact, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet and tired. My mother, on the other hand, was quieter than ever before. The strength she had always shown felt like it was fading, replaced by a sadness that made her seem smaller, as if the betrayal had taken something essential away from her. Sometimes, I caught her staring at her wedding ring like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve anymore. I was caught in the middle, struggling to hold on to the pieces of what used to be my family. But every time I tried to reach out, the tension between them acted like a wall. The unspoken questions filled the room. Will my parents fight? Will they break apart? Can they forgive? Or is this the beginning of an end none of us wanted to face? One evening, the tension exploded. I overheard my father and mother arguing, voices sharp and filled with years of pain and frustration. It was the first time I'd heard raw emotion since the confession, no carefully chosen words, just anger and hurt laid bare. I wanted to run in and stop it, but I was frozen, afraid that one wrong move would make everything worse. That night, as I lay awake, I realized this was the moment everything was about to change. The calm before the storm, the turning point where secrets either destroy or force a reckoning. The fear in my chest wasn't just about my parents anymore, it was about what kind of family we would become, and whether love could survive the wounds left behind. I knew the next steps would be the hardest. The moment of truth was coming, and with it, the chance to either break apart completely or find a new, painful way forward. But how? And at what cost? The answers were still hidden in the silence, waiting for someone to face them head-on. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, something happened that shook me to my core. It was late one evening when I found a message on my father's phone, not meant for me, but impossible to ignore. The words were brief but heavy, "We need to talk. It's not what you think." My heart pounded as I stared at the screen, confused and more afraid than ever. What else was there? Was there more to this story than the confession he had already made? The betrayal I thought I understood suddenly felt like just the tip of the iceberg. I didn't know what to do with that message. Should I confront him? Should I tell my mother? The silence that had once felt suffocating now felt like a ticking time bomb, waiting to explode at any moment. The idea that there was another secret, another piece of the puzzle I was missing, made everything even more uncertain. I realized that my father's confession wasn't the full story, and maybe it never had been. At the same time, my mother started acting differently. She became more distant, spending long hours on the phone, whispering when she thought no one could hear. I caught glimpses of worry in her eyes, but when I asked if she was okay, she just said, "Some things adults have to figure out on their own." Her calm tone didn't fool me. I knew something was happening beneath the surface, something that could change everything. The tension in the house was unbearable. Every glance, every quiet moment seemed charged with secrets waiting to be revealed. The family I thought was broken was now cracking even further. The trust that was already shattered felt like it was breaking into 1,000 pieces I didn't know how to put back together. I was caught between two worlds, the past I thought I understood and the uncertain future that was quickly closing in. The stakes were higher than ever. The next conversation, the next revelation, could either tear us apart forever or force us to confront the truth we had all been avoiding. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what was coming next. The night everything came crashing down was like nothing I could have prepared for. My mother and father finally sat down together in the living room, the air thick with years of pain and unspoken words. I stayed in the hallway, close enough to hear but far enough not to interrupt. They talked for hours, angry, hurt, but honest in ways I hadn't seen before. My father admitted there was more to his story. The affair wasn't just a mistake, it was a symptom of deeper problems, ones he'd been running from for years. He wasn't proud of what he'd done, but he wanted to be honest and try to rebuild what he had broken. My mother, surprisingly, didn't yell or cry. Instead, she spoke quietly about the love she still had, mixed with the pain of betrayal. She said forgiveness wouldn't come easy, but she was willing to try, not just for him, but for the family we all wanted to save. For the first time in a long time, there was a fragile sense of hope between them, like they were standing on the edge of something uncertain but possible. I felt relief, but it was bittersweet. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight, and the wounds were still fresh. But then, just when I thought the hardest part was behind us, my father revealed something no one expected. The other woman wasn't just a stranger, she was someone close to us, someone we had trusted. That truth hit harder than the confession itself. The house went silent, the walls seeming to close in. I realized that healing would be even more complicated than I thought. Love wasn't simple or perfect. It was messy, painful, and full of surprises. And now, more than ever, we had to decide if we could face those truths together, or be torn apart forever. The days after that revelation were some of the hardest we ever faced. The shock of knowing the other woman was someone close to us made the pain deeper, but it also forced us to confront everything honestly. There were difficult conversations, tears, and moments when it felt like the family I knew might never be the same. But slowly, step by step, we began to rebuild, not by forgetting the past, but by learning from it. My parents chose to attend counseling together, trying to understand the reasons behind the betrayal and how to move forward with honesty. It wasn't easy, and there were times when giving up seemed like the simpler choice. But what kept them going, and what helped me find hope, was the idea that love isn't just about perfect moments or promises kept. It's about facing hard truths, forgiving imperfections, and deciding every day to try again. For me, this story taught that love isn't always what we think it is. It's messy and painful sometimes, but it can also be a chance to grow stronger, to understand ourselves better, and to rebuild trust where it's been broken. Betrayal doesn't have to be the end, but it does change everything. Our family's journey isn't over, and healing takes time. But through all the heartbreak and confusion, I learned that real love is about facing the truth, even when it hurts, and choosing to keep going anyway. That's the hardest lesson, and maybe the most important one. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever faced something similar, remember, you're not alone. Healing is possible, and sometimes, love teaches us what it isn't before we understand what it truly is. 2.